Revelation 12 is where we'll start. It says, now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. Okay. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on them. His tail threw a third of the stars of heaven and threw them onto the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and his throne. And her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God that she would feed her there 1,260 days, 3.5 years. All right, so I'm going to stop there for just a minute. Two things I want to do. One, I want to look up this Revelation because it's going to drive me crazy. Revelation 12 sign in the sky.
While you're doing that, can I read it in the Amplified?
Sure, go for it.
I'm going to share screen here so we can go over it because I actually have it pulled up in the Amplified and the TPT. So you should be able to see that on the screen. So what I'm going to do is read that alongside it. A great sign, warning of an ominous and frightening future event, appeared in a heaven. It says here, the woman represents the nation of Israel. The son refers to Jacob, also called Israel, the name divinely bestowed on Jacob at Peniel, and the moon to Rachel, while the 12 stars refer to the 12 tribes of Israel, originating with the sons of Jacob and Rachel, which are in Genesis 37.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so the woman represents the nation of Israel, which we understand that. And that's what we're going to unpack. So I'm glad you said that.
Yes.
The son refers to Jacob, right? Also Israel, the name divinely bestowed upon Jacob, okay? And then Rachel. Okay, so this Revelation 12 sign appeared in September 23rd, 2017. I know it was like at least it's like 7 years ago, almost to the day, or will be to the day. To the day, like as of yesterday. So.
Yes.
So that was very interesting, actually concerning for a lot of people, especially with the rapture possibly happening yesterday. But obviously it didn't. But that doesn't mean something significant didn't happen. You know, this is 7 years ago to the day.
Which at the time you guys are watching this is last week.
You're right. So you're right. So anyway, so it's very interesting. Thank you for correcting that. So I want to unpackage this because like you're starting to right now with the son refers to Jacob. In this analogy of what we're getting here, this imagery, because the sign did appear in the heavens. And so let's unpackage this as we are doing this right now. So we know that the son represents Israel, the male child who was caught up to rule all nations with a rod of iron. So I'm saying that this is Jesus, but also the church. So the Christ and Christ followers, the bride and bridegroom, which are one, in my opinion. So that's why I would say, so she was with child, the Messiah, and she cried out, being in labor and pain, gave birth. Because here, what it says here, now this is something that is very interesting, because I think this passage, chapter 12, is an overview, but an analogy of the overview of what has taken place so far up to the point we read from chapter 1 through up to chapter 12. And so this is kind of just gives you a breakdown, but as an analogy or like a vision or a dream in a way. So she bore a male child who was the woman. The woman was born a male child to her, and that child was caught up to God and his throne. And I thought that was very interesting compared to what has already happened, which is the rapture of the church. At this point, the rapture of the church has already happened because it happened in chapter 7. Yes. So now we're at, she bore a male child who was to rule all nations, and her child was caught up to God and his throne.
And I want to stop you there because if you watched our video from our live from last week, then you know that we were discussing towards the end of it. Go back and actually I'll put it here so you can watch it. We actually had a discussion where you believed that there were 3 raptures. So you're going to want to go back and watch that and listen to that and let us know what you think.
Yes. And so I love how this is breaking this down. So the male child, Jesus and the church is what I believe, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness. Now the woman is Israel. And so again, if you're looking for clues of what's to come and what's happened, like I said, I believe that this is a vision of what's taking place and what has taken place up to this point. Because then it also says that she was She was taken to a place prepared by God. So God's going to protect his Israel. And remember, is because I remember you said this before, that God's bride is Israel and Jesus' bride is the
The
church.
church,
Right.
yes.
And so, and God is gonna save his bride Israel one way or another. So he's gonna protect her in this time because he wants her heart to be towards her. And so that's why he sent the
Towards
100
him.
towards him. And so that's why he sent, thank you. That's why he sent his 144,000 men to minister to Israel at this time. And so they're going to be prepared, witness to.
Okay, while you're doing that, I want to go over it in the TPT where it says, then an astonishing miracle sign appeared in heaven. I saw a woman clothed with the brilliance of the sun, and the moon was under her feet. She was wearing on her head a victor's crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant with and was crying out in labor pains in the agony of giving birth. And I want to point out too, there's several types of crowns that represent different things. So if you have not ever studied that, I encourage you to look up the different types of crowns. If I'm correct, I believe there's 5 different types of crowns. So the fact that she's wearing the head of victor's crown is very telling as well. It points out here that the church is figuratively spoken as a woman, which I know you're also saying Israel is the church, the woman. And the description of her clothed with the sun and the moon, powers of darkness under her feet, point to the victorious church about to give birth to a company of believers who will do the great works of Jesus. So that to me sounds different than Israel and the church, Israel and the church being the bride and the woman. So I'm just wanting to point that out because it also goes on to say the brilliance of his glory throughout the earth. The overcoming bride of Christ is also seen as a woman clothed with the sun.
Yeah.
So there's those 2 points that Simmons makes out there.
Yeah, so I think the sun also like it brought out that the sun is like clothed in the sun, meaning like they've clothed themselves with righteousness, which is from Jacob as their ancestor, is like they follow Jacob or Israel as their their patriarch.
Yes.
So clothed with the sun. So it's interesting that this is saying this because I want to continue moving on. Verse 6, then the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God, and that they should feed her there 1,260 days or 3.5 years. Okay. So then verse 7, a war broke out in heaven. This is all a continuous vision. Okay. So it's kind of like, what's happening right here on earth. And then also what's about to happen in heaven. So it's showing us 2 realms at the same time. Verse 7, a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. And so I made this note when I was studying this, that Satan can no longer come to heaven and accuse us before God, because we are there in heaven. Like the church is, remember, the church is now in heaven.
Yeah,
and so the church is there. So Satan can't come up there and accuse them any longer because because that was his original role, to stamp the seal of approval
as the accuser.
That we are not doing things right, or we're not, so he was the accuser. So now, because we're in heaven, there's no more place for him, because there's not a role for him in that regard anymore. So
we've already had judgment.
Yeah, we've already had judgment and all that stuff for the church has already been there. So because now heaven is now a place without condemnation or accusation of Satan. It's at perfect peace. Satan could no longer come before the throne judgment. So he is finally cast out onto the earth. So Satan, will persecute Israel now. That's his main focus now, is to now be focused on Israel.
As if he hasn't been already.
Well,
We're
yeah.
seeing it play out.
So he's now coming down, and this is where I believe that he will manifest himself as the Antichrist, because now he's got his angels that they're going to get kicked out as well, and now he's on the earth, and now he's going to start messing with Israel and deceive them and anybody else who wants to call upon the name of the Lord, which would become the post tribulation saints. Then I heard, so if we can continue to move on, verse 8, it says, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. Verse 9, so the great dragon was cast out, the serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and power of his church have come, for the accuser of our brethren who have accused them before God and day and night has been cast down. And we just talked about that. And one of our favorite passage of verses, Revelation 12:11 says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants. Now so everybody's happy in heaven, but now the devils in on earth, listen to this warning. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you having great wrath because he knows that his time is short.
So I wanted to kind of touch on some fun facts. Number one, that Israel, God's covenant people, through the Messiah, through whom the Messiah came. That's what we're talking about, and the church representing all believers.
Yep.
The dragon has 7 heads and 10 horns, as you're reading there. So the great red dragon, commonly understood as Satan, is described with 7 heads and 10 horns. I know that some people have said things like that's the Vatican. I've heard all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And the imagery, which is linked in Daniel 7, so you can go back and read that. But this shows John weaving together Old Testament prophecy with new visions, creating a layered tapestry of meaning. And then you read about the war in the heavens, which describes a celestial battle. And I think it's interesting because I know you've often said that we're supposed to know the signs, because in the Old Testament, that's what Jewish tradition was that they looked in the heavens
for signs. They asked Jesus for signs. Give us a sign so we can know that it's actually you. So,
yes. So Mike, which even at his birth, they looked for a star. So Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon and his angels. It's one of the few passages in the Bible that gives detail about conflict in heaven, which again, that is interesting. Specifically names Michael as the archangel, as a warrior leader, and then the dragon's tail sweeping the stars. This one's really interesting to me, especially since I had heard that time where Google tried to take it all off the internet when people were trying to actually, that part that you were talking about that actually was the sign in the heavens, and people were trying to Google search it. And they had said that it was actually there, but they kind of blurred it out if you ever did like a Google Earth thing. So I thought that was interesting. But in verse 4, where it says the dragon's tail sweeps 1/3 of the stars from heaven, many interpret this as a symbolic reference to Satan leading a portion of the angels in rebellion against God, which, I mean, he did that.
Yeah, he did do that.
And so then we have those fallen angels and demons. So just so I'm clarifying, is that another set of angels?
No, I think
it's the same representation.
So I think it's just like these are all clues for us to understand that this is the same enemy that we've been talking about throughout the whole Bible at this point in time. Because, like I said, I think this vision is to show us what's happening, what's happened, and what's about to happen, especially at this point in time. So it's trying to show, I believe what this is trying to do is trying to show us 2 realms at the same time, what's going on in earth and what's going on in heaven at the same time. And so because heaven and that realm is without a timeline, it's saying here's a glimpse of what's happening. Because that's the way my mind wraps around it, because there's no time in heaven or in that realm. It's like showing us all this events all at one time, so that way we can understand how it's happening. So that it's still referencing who this person is, or this demonic entity is, which is the devil, who's already swept those angels out of heaven. So
not chronologically though, because he is outside of time. So again, going back to
let me touch on this too before we get going, just to kind of tie this all together, what you just read. And so so this portion right here, in this portion, chapter 12, 1 through 12, talks about what has happened, what is happening during this time period. And so we're getting a glimpse. So we understand that there's a war that's broken out, that the devil's been kicked out of heaven, the saints are already in heaven. He's lost his role there of persecuting the church, because now the church is in heaven. And so now the devil's being cast out with his 1/3 of angels that turned in rebellion. So they're now all on the earth. And now this proclamation or this warning that we got is, okay, woe to the inhabitants on the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you having great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. So now This is where I believe that the Antichrist will rise and be understood or be revealed because the Satan is now on earth.
So is this like a Cliff Notes version, basically, of like Jesus' birth on? Because I know they say some believe that, especially the theme comes in verse 11, that believers believe overcome Satan by the blood of the Lamb, the word of their testimony, which makes Revelation 12 not just apocalyptic, but deeply practical, showing how faith and testimony defeat spiritual evil. And I know that some people even read this during the Advent or Christmas because it portrays the Messiah and the attempt of evil to stop him during the Christ's birth and mission. So, but I do want to point this part out because I feel like this part's going to be very deep as we go through it. And I want to hear from you. The imagery of the dragon trying to devour a divine child echoes myths from the ancient Near East and Greco-Roman world, such as the story of Leto, Apollo, which we went to Greece and we saw, the dragon Python, which is interesting if you've ever read the book about Python, the Python Spirit by Pastor Jensen. John may have been intentionally using familiar cultural imagery to communicate deeper truths about Christ's victory. So if you know during that time period, then you would understand what that means, especially as much as they put into different myths around that time period and that culture. It is interesting that he's using the dragon.
I think that these, especially John Revelator, when he's talking about these things, I mean, he's being shown things that he can understand, but also so that he can communicate to the church, especially because there's a lot of the church who would read this at that time are familiar with different myths and different, myths and cultures and idolatry and imagery and different types of stories and things like that. So to intentionally to get the attention to how they would understand it, just like Jesus used a lot of analogies for fishermen and wedding talk. We talked about that before. So I think whatever imagery they can use as an analogy, so that way people can understand and grasp it and maybe get their attention. I think that he's going to use that for sure. As we read on verse 13, it says the woman is persecuted. Now, when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time and a time's half a time from the presence of the serpent. So the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, and he might cause her to be carried away from the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ, which I believe that will be the post-rapture church. And so there's a lot here, because I think, again, so we know what has happened, what will happen, has happened, what is happening at that time and will happen moving forward, as the woman, the church, or the post-rapture church, part of Israel at that time, will be persecuted by by Satan, and so this is kind of giving us some imagery of what this would look like and how she will be persecuted. Now, there is some imagery here that it might be a little bit challenging to unfold, but it says the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, which is interesting, because I wonder what this actually means here. And you can put in the comments below what you may be getting from this as well, because I think it's good as a conversation for Bible study, because during this portion right here, she's taken to a place and she's giving rest for times and half a time away from the face of the dragon. So she's being carried away and being protected. But the imagery that we're being shown is she's given 2 wings of a great eagle. Now, what does that mean? We don't know, because at this time, obviously, there were no planes at that time. I mean, I don't know if these are planes that's taking these people away, that she can fly and escape, or what this actually means. So I'm curious what you think.
So it says here, the man-child is a company of believers who have overcome the dragon. These are symbolic 144,000 victorious ones. Give birth to the man-child.
I know I put another scripture reference. I'm gonna go that I put in here 2 Thessalonians 5:8 when I was studying through this. I'm gonna go back to that, because I think there was some things there that I might have missed. I definitely want to talk about.
So then we can ask Holy Spirit, what do you want us to know? What is this with the 2 wings of the great eagle were given to the woman so that she could fly and escape into the wilderness of her own special place? Because he will tell you if you sit and listen. Sometimes he might tell you right away. Sometimes he might tell you over the next couple of days, but he will tell you if you ask him.
Okay, this is Second Thessalonians 2, 5 through 8. I put a note here. I want to know why I wrote this here, so I'm gonna just read this. Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things, and now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time? For the mystery of the lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with his breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. So, yes. So I think that's just a reference to chapter 12 about woe to the inhabitants, because remember that Satan's been kicked out of heaven. And now that we were the ones that were restraining him because we carry the Holy Spirit, he couldn't do anything. But now that he's here on earth, he's got no restraint. He could do whatever he wants, with obviously with some restraint, but he's given full reign to do whatever he wants to persecute the church at this time. The post-rapture church, I would say, just to clarify. So verse 15, so the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman. So I know when we hear water or fluid or a flood, sometimes that can reference a multitude of people of some sort. So maybe that these people were being attacked by an army of people. Maybe the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood or by the people. And I know, actually, you know what? It's funny because that's not funny. What's interesting was that when Israel was attacked on October 7th, that was another thing that people used as scripture reference. I remember they used this because the woman was persecuted, meaning Israel was persecuted, and the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. And I think they were using this reference because, like I said, water can sometimes mean people, and being carried away by the flood. It could be carried away by the people that were persecuting them. And then October 7th, there were a lot who were carried away and became captors and held captive. So it's interesting. But the continuation of that verse says, but the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. So which is interesting. So, but the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. So I would say that this flood is probably a flood of either beings, or it could be an army that he has amassed to persecute the church. That's why it's using the flood as a analogy of people, because it's interesting that the earth would open up its mouth. And we've heard that too in scripture too, that remember when Moses, and somebody came across accosted Moses, and I think it's like in Moses' time, where there's like 2 people that came against Moses, and they tried to cause people to come against Moses and the way he was doing things, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed those people whole. Korah. Yeah. So I find that interesting. So is that something that's happened in the past? Yes. Is that something that would happen? Yes. So
I actually feel like it's water. I
it's
mean,
actual water.
yeah, because it says, and the serpent hurled water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, so that he might cause her to be swept away with the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed up the river which the dragon had hurled out of his mouth. And in Exodus 15:12, it says that you remove the waters from me. So I believe it's an actual raging river.
Could be.
Man, it even makes me think of
Absolutely.
how circumstances, well, it even makes me think of Moses and parting of the Red Sea. I mean, he opened up the Red Sea, but I'm also even thinking of little things that he's done, like which are not little things. Unfortunately, we think of like Camp Mystic that happened this year, and then we see what the enemy meant for evil, and so I just think of other times where there was actual literal floods, and the serpent hurled water like a river out of his mouth after the woman. And the woman, you said again, is supposed to be
Israel. Yeah.
Israel. So
the reason why I'm saying that is because To be consistent, if this is using imagery or analogy, like some things can be like if you're talking about something that's all like a vision,
Right.
it has to be consistent. Like it all has to mean something. Like the dragon's obviously Satan, not an actual dragon, right? So the woman is not actually a woman; it's actually Israel. So my mind goes to, okay, so what does a flood mean? Does that actually mean a flood, or does that mean something like people? So I see what you're saying. Like it could absolutely be a flood, like what you're saying. Because the other thing I would say is about this is that the enemy loves to manipulate and twist things that God's already used. He can't create anything new. He has to use whatever's there and manipulate it. So if the Red Sea crossing was something that God has used numerous of times to get his people to escape, why not try to manipulate this or twist this to get Israel, who would be well aware of the crossing, to manipulate this experience to cause a flood to carry them away versus to be a way for them to escape. And so yeah, I mean, I could see that both ways for sure.
But then you go back to prior to that, the two wings of the great eagle were given to a woman so that she could fly and escape to the wilderness at her own special place where she was nourished for that 3.5 years. Then the dragon spewed. So once he pulls them out, I wonder if he's pulled them out of hiding at that point, or they're still
Maybe there's a
in the
trap.
wilderness.
Yeah.
Are they, maybe they're still in the wilderness, because it doesn't show that they come back. It says then, meaning at the time they're still in the wilderness, the dragon spewed from his mouth a raging river of water, which would be interesting because again, they're in the wilderness being cared for. But the earth came to the rescue of the woman, and at once opened its mouth and swallowed the river. So to me, that still happens in the wilderness.
Yeah, absolutely. And because she's in our special place. And I think some people said that reading some of these different cross-referencing some of the Old Testament, there is a place that is absolutely prepared for her. Going back to verse 14, that she can escape to her own special place where she was nourished for times and a half, so 3.5 years. And I think there might be a trap because I think the dragon or the enemy knows where this place is. And maybe he set a trap for her. If we're using this as an army that he maybe had set up for her to set a trap, the earth swallowed up or opened its mouth or opened up and swallowed these people or water or river or whatever we're going with here. Because verse 17, the dragon became enraged at the woman and went off to make war against the remnant of her offspring who follow the commands of God and have the testimony of Jesus. And the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. So I think this is very interesting as we continue to unfold this. And I love reading this. And I don't know about you guys who read this. And it's one of my favorite books to study because there's so much richness in this and so much to uncover. And I love getting revelation from that. So do you want to move on to 13 or do you want to talk about this more?
Yeah, so we'll stop there and then we're going to be back with you guys next week. I want you guys to be able to ask the Holy Spirit to give you more of the clarity on this, because we want to hear from you. We want to hear in the comments what you're getting as you go through the week, and then we will be back next week and we'll be able to go over chapter 13 with you.
All right, guys. Bye for now. We'll see you guys next time. Yeah, that's so good, though.